can go with more questions. Meanwhile, I'm walking you through the next demo on how do you create a container instance. To do that, you can go to create a resource. And container instance is available under a category called containers on the left side. So you can see containers, container instances. This is the one.
Maybe an out of topic question, but
create a resource.
One thing, sorry, okay. Do you want me to hold and we can ask question later, or you can go ahead?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question, maybe not directly related to the topic, but say for example, I have an image that is not Azure specific. Maybe it's coming from AWS or Oracle Cloud. So can I import that as an image in this container here? If it is a container,
I don't think AWS is having a separate Docker orchestration. So container images are common everywhere. So yes, you can bring an image from GCP or AWS to Azure and vice versa. It works.
It works? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now same process. Create a resource, container menu event, and I picked container instances. Now let's say resource group. Again, this case I'll create a new resource group just to show it. So choosing create a new and name it as container-rg, container resource group. And I click OK. So this is a container registry I'm creating, not a container it's a container instance I'm creating, not a container registry, which means a place where you can directly host a container application. A container name, let's say my app, I'll name it, or let's say my container, I'll name it. Now let it be anywhere, whatever the default location it comes up with. The image source in this example, I'll say from a quick start image, I want to take an image. Let's say I like to take an image of probably this MCR Microsoft OS Nginx we have. Let's say in this case, I'll go with Windows Server, a quick start image of it, which will come with IIS Web Server, which means a container gets created with IIS Web Server running for you. I'll go with this one. Now note this, you can pull the images by different other sources as Docker Hub or Docker Registry or Azure Container Registry as well by selecting options in here. For now, I'm not walking you through that. So I pick a quick start image as this one, the last option. So a Windows container will get created with IIS Web Server running in it. So I'll click on Review plus Create, and I get this. Now, what is the difference between a container instance versus a web app? I'll click Create first. Now, a web app is something I already discussed. A web application that is scalable, which means you can scale from 1 CPU core to 100 CPU cores so easily with the settings in it. But a container instance is not so. It's only for testing and dev in most cases. Whereas in production, you should connect this with Kubernetes. Because this one once created, right now if you see, I have 2 CPU cores and 2.5 GB RAM for this container instance. Once it is created, I cannot change that 2 CPU cores or 2.5 GB RAM to higher or lower size, which means it's not scalable, and moreover, it is only for quick testing and development of any container applications you develop in most cases. Maybe if you want to use it in production, you can use it. That's where you integrate container instance with Kubernetes. If not, in all the cases, that is the scenario for it. Are you creating container directly on EC2? Typically, Divya, in here in Azure, it's container instance. So in AWS, your Elastic thing which you get is like Elastic Container Service, I believe. Here it's not so. In here we have container instance as a separate service, container registry as a separate service. Now it's the same concept. But just to avoid time of developing a container image, we just pulled an existing image available and showing the output in container instance, where container will run inside that container as a service. Okay, Rohan, I think Divya gave you an answer. An image is nothing but, as Divya mentioned, it's a piece of your application program that is built and compiled and given as a container application. So there are like simplified ways where from a basic container image you create it. Whether every service needs a new resource group. We can use same resource group. I'm just trying to show you like every resource in a different RG, but you can use same resource group for everything. I'll go to the resource, my container I created now. See, it has a public IP address. It will appear in here. At this point of time, you can see I'll click start button to start it, because currently it shows no public IP, which means my container is not starting, or let's say it's idle. It is just pushed. See, it's pulled now, and it's this image which is terminated, it says. So whatever the image I took now, it was typically mcr.microsoft Windows Server core image it was, which I pulled. If I go to overview, if I start it, the image will start, and it's typically just a Windows Server core image. It's not a web server image, I believe. So you get a public IP, but I'm not sure if that is having a, I mean, when I started, I get a public IP, but whatever the image I pulled seems to be, it's a Windows Server core image, which is not a web server, I believe. It's just a normal Windows Server core image, because when I was doing it, that's what I pulled. So now normally if you want to access your container now, you can use this public IP. In case if it is a web application, you get a response here. If it is any API, you can make a API call, or if it is any internal microservice, you can test it by using the IP whichever you get in here. So in the given case, I made a request, but it's a Windows Server Nano core image. I don't think it's a web server, so I don't believe I'll be getting a web server as a response. You don't get it. But in the background, the factor is that you have a container which is start, completed the job, and stop for you. So note this, in my case, I use the Windows Server Nano core image, whereas if you do the demo with this lab material are given to you, just in case you're using the lab material to do the demo, the image that you would be pulling will be different. So this ACI hello world image you will be pulling an image that will execute for you, which will show this container as hello world as an output when you ping to the IP of it. But the concept is same. So you can just see when you do the demo, you'll find it. It's almost the same concept, whichever you can see. So in my case, I pulled out the default image of this one. Now this is running as a container in this container instance service. Any questions until this now on up to container instances from anyone?